This podcast is entirely generated by AI.
No, it wasn't. It was produced by us. I am Marietta.
And I'm Laura.
And you're listening to the Interactives podcast.
This year we will be talking about all things AI and journalism. Is the profession threatened, or is it going to thrive with the help of these tools?
We are so excited to be your hosts this year. Just to reassure you, no, ChatGPT didn't write any of these episodes.
We are student journalists doing an MA course, and we are so impatient to start a career in the world of journalism.
Laura, I feel like we'll never find a job.
Why? What happened to being more positive this year?
I know, but it seems like AI is taking over journalism and our jobs. I'm deeply concerned about its impact, and I've read somewhere that by 2025, 90% of written content will be generated by AI.
Yes, even audio format is kind of threatened. Because it's not just the tool that can be used for writing, but there is also one that creates podcasts. But let's look at the bright side, because AI can also really help us in many aspects of storytelling. We've brought you amazing experts today who are patiently waiting for us to stop talking now.
Wait, but we still need to ask the questions, right?
Yes, let's get on to it.
Do you know that some people have been suggesting that judges should be replaced by AI because it's unbiased and doesn't have any emotions? So it's kind of the same with journalism, unless it's an opinion piece. You want to be impartial and you don't want to impose any of your beliefs on your readers.
Yes, I know, but it doesn't necessarily mean that AI is better at writing. Let's ask Mattia Peretti, who is the manager of Journalism AI, a collaboration between the London School of Economics and Google News Initiative. Mattia, can you give our listeners your expertise on AI and bias?
Bias in general is a problem with AI, but I always try to move away from the idea that there is bias in humans and there is a different type of bias in AI, because artificial intelligence doesn't have a bias in itself. It just replicates and multiplies our own biases. So it's on us, the humans, so to speak, to make sure that the databases we create and that we use to train these technologies, and also the way then we use the technology itself, is unbiased, to borrow your words. It's a big issue. Probably we could speak half an hour just about that. But I always like to put the responsibility, as we like to say, on us as the journalist, because only we can minimize the potential harm of these technologies. The technology itself doesn't decide to do good or to harm someone.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I also spoke to someone else who said that AI is what we feed to it, and that's what AI will bring back to us. I'm also interested in our audience's needs, though. Laura, do you think AI can be used to understand our readers, or listeners in this case, better?
Yes, there's actually a thing called modular journalism. It's supposed to support a new kind of storytelling that is more focused on users' needs. But I'm not the expert here. Mattia, can you tell us a little bit more?
Modular journalism is something that I find as a very interesting trend and very interesting approach. And it's still, I would say, very much in an experimental phase, although some newsrooms have already done very creative things with that. And with modular journalism, I would just describe it as an approach that tries to ask some very hard questions about journalism from the point of view of content, starting from the question whether the article as an artifact is still the best way to give information, like as to turn information in something that readers consume. Very often we know from extensive research, our readers don't read the articles that newsrooms produce for a variety of ways, maybe because they're not interested in what we're publishing, maybe because the articles are too long and give them information that they don't need, maybe because they're just looking for the answer to a very specific question, not to a long form article that tells them everything about a topic. And there are many other reasons. So what modular journalism tries to do is to start from the user needs. So figure it out. Okay, what are the different needs that the readers come to us with? Maybe they want to be informed, they want to be entertained, they want to know how this specific piece of news impact their own local community, for example. And we could go on in terms of like the list of user needs. And then the idea is, can we use technology to repackage our content in different formats to meet different user needs, which means that you as a journalist don't have to write the same article in 10 different formats to meeting those user needs, but maybe you can write modules, hence the name of the approach, that can automatically be combined in different ways depending on the specific user need of the readers.
At the end of the day, a good journalist should put their audiences first and produce good quality content.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, now with AI, there are so many opportunities for producing quality content with the help of machine learning. An interesting example is using satellite images to detect changes over time, like with climate change, for example. But I'm not entirely sure where AI fits into that exactly. So, Mattia, over to you again.
Yeah, that's a branch of AI that is called computer vision, mostly, if we want to be more precise. And I always like to use an example that it happens to be from Ukraine, although not about the war, because it's from 3 years ago, where we collaborated in a couple of occasions with a data journalism organization from Ukraine called Texty. And they published a super interesting investigation in 2019 into illegal amber mining in Ukraine. So a topic more related to the climate change rather than the war, of course. What they did was, of course, they knew from sources that in the forest of Ukraine, there was a big issue of illegal mining of amber from illegal actors, so to speak. And they wanted to understand the magnitude of the problem to really then be able to write a story about it and help society understand how much damage was being done to the climate and to the forest of Ukraine, and also how much money was being taken away from the country from this illegal mining. So what they realized was that they wanted to check satellite imagery of the country, the way you can do it on Google Earth, on Google Maps, for example. But of course, us humans, we go back to what we were discussing before, we can do that. But if we're going to go an entire country like Ukraine, that is pretty big, frame by frame, to try to see in the imagery if we can recognize issues there, that's going to take us forever. So what they did was to train a machine learning model to recognize some patterns of amber mining, which are very use case for this, because to mine amber, I'm not an expert, I learned through this story. Once that happens, there are some very clear holes on the ground left by amber mining. So it was a perfect use case, because the machine learning model can learn, okay, when I see something that looks like this, it's likely to be a case of amber mining. And so I can create a package, a folder of all the images that I recognized. So then the journalist, and here's the collaboration between us and the AI, can go through those images specifically, rather than having to go through the whole country on Google Maps, and try to understand, is this amber mining in the first place? Maybe no. Sometimes the machine learning model gets it wrong and thinks that it is. Maybe it's just some different kind of holes on the ground. And if it is it something that is regulated? In this area, do we know that amber mining is regulated or not? If not, here we have evidence of illegal amber mining, and we can write a story about it. And that story was incredibly impactful, because it allowed then the government to have the data to act on it and tackle this issue of illegal amber mining on the ground.
Now that we talked about change over time, there is something else that kind of evolved in the way we used to perceive it. And it's going to sound a little bit odd at first, but I'm talking about quotes.
Wait, isn't it common sense what a quote is? What do you mean?
It is, but it gets more complicated when you have to explain it to a machine and you want you to go through your entire archive.
But it still doesn't make sense. Why would you want to track your quotes?
The Guardian did it, and it was very useful for them, but Mattia knows more about it.
The project you're referring to was a collaboration in 2021 between The Guardian in the UK and AFP in France. And it's actually a few steps back, in a sense, in the idea of understanding quotes. That really comes from the point of view of understanding we, as The Guardian, for example, as a big news organization with a long history, has a lot of content in their archive as well. And very often it could be useful to understand what sources have already been used and quoted in articles. So if we want for a machine learning model to be able to recognize quotes, to help us filter them, maybe create a library of quotes that we can reuse, and also help us understand who are we quoting, that is an incredibly interesting insight of that project, we need to be able to better define what a quote is for ourselves, so then this type of process can be automated. The last part is what I'm really interested in, and I found super interesting in their project, was that luckily many newsrooms right now are being more aware about the diversity of the voices that they quote in their articles. So being able to automate this type of research, so you can say, okay, in the last month, for example, 80% of our quote were men and only 20% were women, or any other kind of like disparity, that's data that can really help a newsroom that really cares about diversity, realizing, okay, we need to do better about this. We need to have better sources that are women. We need to have more sources that are people of color, or anything else. We can continue on the list. And that's kind of like, it wasn't necessarily maybe what they started the project for, but it was one, in my opinion, of the most interesting insights of that research.
Thank you so much, Mattia, for your input on the subject.
Yes, thank you, Mattia. That was so interesting. Our next guest is.
Hang on, you're not the host here.
Very well. I'll take my leave then.
Our next guest is Marcela Cunova, editor of journalism.co.uk.
We invited her because we are curious about what news outlets are using AI for and what risks might come, especially now with all the AI chatbots like ChatGPT.
She wrote an amazing article suggesting what ChatGPT can do for us journalists. It can certainly make us more productive because daily tasks like summarizing texts or writing emails can be done by AI.
Oh yes, it can also generate headlines for us. A little challenge for our listeners. Why don't you try A/B testing with a headline of yourself and one created by an AI?
But what about writing actual articles? Marcela, what's your view on it?
I don't think journalists should use any text or audio generating tool to create content to be published. Just don't do it. Simple as. It's not what these tools are for. You'll get into trouble. It's there to help you do journalism, not do journalism for you. Very often I encounter this attitude of just a bit too much, not so only trust, but kind of people deal with a machine as if it were a person. They are not a person. It's a machine. So you would not double check everything someone says, but you have to double check everything a machine gives you.
That makes it sound even more time consuming.
Marcela, are you worried that AI chatbots like Bing and Bard will change users' searching habits and that journalists should be working on new SEO strategies?
The problem with these artificial intelligence aggregators is that they can not only get an excerpt from a website, but they can just put together text from multiple sources. So it will be impossible to detangle what comes from where, who said that, and how can you verify what it is. But the danger is that people will read the first paragraph, 2 paragraphs, not know where it comes from, not click on the link of the potentially trustworthy source. And for publishers, this is going to be a massive headache, because if, say, breaking news, if your 15, 20 papers cover the same, Prime Minister questions or whatever it can be, the topic is the same. So the machine can really just aggregate, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs from 15 publishers, and neither of them will get nor the credit, nor the traffic, nor the trust of the audience.
That sounds terrifying. No one will read our articles then. Which AI tools have you given a try yet, Marcela?
I mean, listen, I give try to everything because I literally want to see what, with GPT, I spent pretty much a day with it, just having more and more laugh because, the thing was getting absolutely absurd. We have text-to-speech tool on the website for better accessibility. So the sort of robot voice that reads you the article.
Oh, that's a friend of mine.
This use of sort of voice AI, perfectly legit and I think very, very useful.
Thank you, Marcela. Really enjoyed talking to you.
On the next episode, we will be talking to Ines Montani, CEO of Explosion AI, and Anna Wissens, data scientist at The Guardian, who will tell us more about the project we touched on briefly in this episode.
Now, should we let Amy conclude this episode? I feel so bad for her.
Amy, come back.
Thank you, Laura. I hope our listeners enjoyed this first episode. Don't forget to subscribe, and we will see you next week.